All right, hello everyone. Hope everyone is having a good New Year so far, staying healthy, and let's just get right into it. So I have some topics tonight to talk about in addition to answering some questions. There's been a lot of different papers going around the anti-vaccine circles, papers that I feel like I could make a video about, but it would be a pretty short video, so figure why not just cover them in this live stream. So, all right, let's get straight into it. The first paper I want to, let's get straight into it. The first paper I want to talk about is this class switching paper. So, anti-vaxxers are sharing this class switch paper around and acting like it's evidence that the vaccine is bad, essentially. So let me just talk about what this paper shows, and then I will talk about what the anti-vaxxers say. So this paper is talking about how antibodies will class switch over time, over multiple vaccinations or infections, in order to switch to this IgG4 isotype. Now, just some background here. Antibodies are generally structured like this general Y shape, and the segments of the protein are as follows. You have the variable regions up at the top of the Y here. These are the regions that actually bind antigen. These are highly variable. They change a lot from antibody to antibody because they have to recognize a lot of different antigens. Down here is called the FC region. This is the region that will generally elicit or exert some immune functions. So if an antibody has bound its antigen, it's going to stick out, and this region might be recognized by an immune cell to do some function. The functions are, they vary widely. But anyway, you can think of the different IgG subclasses as they're generally going to bind similar antigens in this case, but the FC region might perform different functions. So when it comes to IgG4, its FC region doesn't really do much. It does do some things, but compared to other IgG subtypes, it doesn't do much. It mostly serves as a neutralizing antibody, so it's going to bind the antigen and neutralize it so that the antigen can't do anything. In this case, it's spike. The antigen is binding spike, or the antibody is binding spike and making it so that spike can't function properly. Again, this paper is just showing that over time, after multiple doses or infections, the authors are clear about that. They say that this response is further boosted by a third mRNA vaccination and or by breakthrough infections with SARS-CoV-2 variants of concern. You see a gradual shift in the antibody population to this IgG4 above what is normally observed. So they go through, further in the paper, they compare multiple exposures of, say, RSV or other respiratory viruses, this section here, to SARS-CoV-2, and they say, oh, we don't see this phenomenon in other respiratory infections, but we see it with SARS-CoV-2. It's a really interesting observation. It's a really interesting observation that IgG4 is preferred, and that's what we're observing. We're observing that the immune system over time, with multiple exposures to the same antigen, is maturing in a way that that prioritizes IgG4 a little bit more than what we would expect. So what does this mean? Well, it means that that's just what the immune system is picking. And if we look at what this means clinically, well, we see that a third dose or booster doses of vaccine remain really strong in preventing severe disease and outcomes of death by COVID. As you can see here by this data, The difference between the vaccinated and unvaccinated is very large when it comes to death. When you go further out, the difference gets small because the unvaccinated and unexposed, in other words, the people who have never been vaccinated and never gotten infected, those numbers are getting smaller and smaller. So the difference gets closer and closer, but we can see that there is still a distinct difference. So ultimately, what does this mean? This IgG subclass switching? It's just an interesting observation that we don't understand yet. And there is no clinical evidence to suggest that it is harmful or something we should be worried about. Okay? I don't know how anti-vaxxers cherry pick this paper out of all the papers out there. I'm really interested to see who picks this paper and then shoves it along the anti-vaccine pipeline, because clearly these people are not actually reading the paper, or they're just purposely picking parts of it that they know are going to go viral in the anti-vaccine community and that people in the anti-vaccine community aren't going to check them on. Ultimately, you don't need to worry about this observation. It's just an interesting observation. That's it. So hopefully that helps clear up some things. I know that this paper has been going around a lot. I've been getting questions about it. So let's go back to the chat here and see what y'all think about it. Yeah, Happy New Year, everybody. What are my thoughts on the new XBB variants? They're new variants. SARS-CoV-2 is going to continue to evolve and mutate, and so we're going to keep seeing new variants. But I don't think there's any reason why vaccines aren't going to hold up to them. I don't think there's any evidence that XBB is any more dangerous than previous variants. People are very quick to claim that whenever a new variant is gaining ground, but they're claiming that with generally no evidence, because how are you going to determine that it's actually more virulent, that it's actually more infectious, more deadly? You're not going to demonstrate that within the first few months of a variant coming out. Yeah, I'm taking questions. You can type a question whenever you want, and if I'm going over a paper, then I'll get to it right after I'm done. There is a paper that shows ginger has affinity to SARS-CoV-2 spike and has clinical improvement for males. Oh, ginger as in like the food. Is that what you're saying? I wouldn't expect ginger to actually have any clinical benefits. That's just I don't know what this study did or what they showed, but that would just be my guess. The Big Logic interacted with this person a little bit before stream over chat. Says healthy kids are dying in car accidents at 5 times the rate of COVID-19, yet we're not declaring an emergency for kids riding in cars and giving them an experimental, potentially harmful intervention. No, but your child is required to be in a car seat until a certain age. Your child is required to wear a seatbelt. Your car is required to be fitted with airbags and proper brakes and get inspected. You are required to have a driver's license to be deemed a safe driver. There are tons of interventions that we take in order to make driving safer for children specifically. Just like that, we take precautions with our children's health against infectious diseases as well. Again, over 1,000 children have died of COVID. Most of those deaths have been from Omicron. Those deaths are going to continue to accumulate every single wave and every single time the naive population replenishes itself. We've seen this with measles. We've seen this with polio. All of these infectious diseases have these waves of death coming periodically. And you know how we prevent those periodic deaths? Vaccination. If you don't want to prevent those deaths, then you don't belong here. I'm sorry. Well, Dean, in 15, I just addressed someone who is asking what I think you would consider a reasonable question. I just put people in timeout if they continue to spam and troll, so I don't block people. What do you mean I blocked you? How are you commenting then? Ginger supplement. Okay, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't expect it to have an effect. But if you DM me the study, I can maybe get to it and, tell you a bit of a more detailed response. A driver's license does not have potential long-term effects like cancer. Neither does mRNA vaccination. There is zero chance that an mRNA vaccine can cause cancer. That is absolutely ridiculous. Do you think the new XBB variant will make it more important for people to get the bivalent booster? I'm a long hauler for 6 months too, so worried about reinfection. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I hope that your long COVID gets better, but maybe we're starting to see some data that a bivalent booster is better in terms of preventing things like hospitalization, but I don't know how strong those data are yet. We'll see. It would make sense that a bivalent booster would be better in preventing those severe outcomes than the ancestral monovalent shots, but we'll see. We'll see in the next couple of months. If you're really worried, then go get the bivalent. If you're at high risk, I'd say go get the bivalent, because the only way we're going to know that the bivalent is better than the 3 doses of the ancestral is when more people get really sick or die. And so, if you're in that high risk group and you don't want to be one of those people who are part of that data set, then go get the bivalent shot. Where is the emergency legit question you're not answering? I did answer. Children are dying preventable deaths. How is that not an emergency to you? If you can prevent those deaths now, instead of waiting longer time to send the vaccine through a longer and more cumbersome approval process, why not approve it now? And prevent those deaths and all that suffering. Okay. What are your thoughts on DF-CoV-01? I actually don't know what that is. DF-CoV-01. A drug. Okay. Well, I can read more about this later. Yeah, I don't know much about. I don't know anything about DF-CoV-01 yet, but now I know what it is. What about vaccines in China? Will they stand up to the present surge? So the problem in China is that, well, we don't really know good numbers from China, I guess, but if mainland China is anything like Hong Kong, then we know that the vaccination campaign has not been super successful, especially among the elderly, who are the ones who are most susceptible. So in Hong Kong, China's a lot of the elderly remained unvaccinated. So when Omicron came through Hong Kong, it really did a number on especially the most vulnerable. So yeah, I think that's probably what's happening in mainland China. They're just not sufficiently vaccinated, and they obviously don't have any prior infection because of the zero COVID policies. So yeah, I think that's what we're seeing. Brian Mac asks, the anti-vaxxers are promoting the global COVID summit. Have you heard of it? Is that the thing where I think in previous years they assembled the the goon squad of anti-vaxxers like Ryan Cole and Robert Malone and Pierre Corey and just had like a conversation? Is that what that is? Pfizer's COVID vaccine insert states, has not been evaluated for potential to cause carcinogenicity, genotoxicity, or impairment of male fertility. Okay, tell me how an mRNA vaccine is going to increase risk of cancer. When you can do that and give me a plausible mechanism, then, we can start having a conversation. But I don't think you even know how cancer works if you think that mRNA vaccines can be carcinogenic or genotoxic. And no, it doesn't impair male fertility. That's been well studied. You both are typing the same thing. Are these two people the same person? This Dean in 500 and the Big Logic literally typing the same things? Anyway, Coco B asks, do you think they'll release Novavax for general population? So from what I understand, there's going to be a VerbPAC meeting. I don't remember what VerbPAC stands for, but it's essentially a vaccine recommendation board. Paul Offit's on it, about Novavax, I think in late January, so later this month. So I don't know what the deal with Novavax is, but hopefully we'll get some more information then. The early data looked promising, so I hope it becomes an option for people who are terribly afraid of mRNA vaccines, which they don't understand. Hey doc, maybe that's more expensive, but we can support you. Would you be able to post the comments when you read them out and comment on them? Oh yeah, I should. It just requires me, I think, getting a plugin and using Chrome. I've been lazy about that. I'm sorry. I should just do that before my next live stream so that I can have the comments appear on screen as I address them. Yeah, thank you for reminding me of that. Jake Edmondson asks, hi Dr. Wilson, thanks for doing this. I just came across John Campbell's latest video saying the vaccine caused a severe adverse effect in 1 out of 800 in a study that sounds funky. Please check it out below. Okay, yeah, I have not been following John Campbell. The last video I made about him, I wanted that to be my last video about him, and I meant that. So, yeah, I just haven't been following him. But I'm sure that he's still spreading garbage. Please, do you have an opinion on Bruce Hammock, PhD research? I don't know who he is. Sorry. But yeah, if you want me to take a look at any of this stuff, just, yeah, let me know, and I will do my best to get to it. All right, Elena McCullum asks, so if the spike protein is supposed to slowly get out of your system, why are some people having it found up to a year later? I don't know about a year later. That seems way too long. But so anyway, you're asking about these studies that find supposed spike protein a long time after vaccination. So they're finding minuscule amounts of spike in the blood for a few months after. And those authors had speculated at the time that they were membrane-bound spike. So really either on an immune cell or on another membrane. So it's not like it's being constantly produced. It's just tiny amounts that remain. Either that or they'll find peptides in germinal centers, which is normal. You have follicular T cells, which will keep peptides in germinal centers in order to keep antibodies, or keep the B cells that produce antibodies maturing. So, in any case, those observations have not been associated with a clinical observation. They're not observed. It's not observed to be harmful. You're probably going to have a lot more spikes sticking around in your blood for just as long, if not longer, following an infection. All right. Motuera asks, what would you say to the people who casually mention that airports or airlines are taking off masks as if it's a good thing? It's frustrating seeing the number of times it's been brought up. Yeah, so essentially people being happy that they don't have to wear masks on airlines, right? I mean, I get it. I get why people don't want to wear masks on airlines. What would I say to them? I would just say, well, just make sure if you've learned anything from this pandemic, just make sure that you are wearing a mask on a plane if you are sick. That, at the very least, please do that. But I don't know. I mean, don't shame them. Don't try to make them feel bad for being happy that they don't have to wear a mask on a plane anymore. Give them space to have their ideas heard, their feelings heard. But just encourage them, I would say, to understand when they still should wear a mask, even if the rules are gone. I think that's the best I could do, I think, in that situation. Mr. Alien says, I have read that the Moderna has a greater likelihood of inducing myocarditis in the 18 to 25 male demo. Is it safe to say that for this particular group, it may be more dangerous than the virus? No, it would not be. So yeah, the Moderna vaccine in that age group in males, that's where we see the highest rates of myocarditis associated with COVID vaccines. But even still, SARS-CoV-2, the virus, is more dangerous. Because even in that group, when we see myocarditis, most of them recover. The vast majority of the time recover, and it's not, it doesn't cause any long-term illness. So meanwhile, the virus could cause much more serious damage beyond myocarditis. It could cause more serious heart complications. It could cause you to go to the hospital, intubated, could even cause you to die. I mean, I just think there's no question that the vaccine is safer than the virus. I have a question. Mama Wolf says, I have a question. Many historical graphs show that diseases like measles plummeted before the vaccine was introduced. So deaths from measles started decreasing before the vaccines were rolled out. That was mostly due to advances in medicine, independent of vaccination. But cases of measles were still really high before vaccination came along. And still, thousands of children died of measles every time it came along. That didn't go to zero, and the cases didn't go to zero until vaccines came along. Roger Trimble asks, when it comes to vaccine shedding, I've heard some experts claiming it can happen with the COVID vaccines, but a vaccine has to be live vaccine, does it not, for shedding to occur? Yeah, you're correct. A non-live vaccine cannot shed. For example, a polio oral polio vaccine, you can shed that. Because it's a live vaccine, you can shed it in your feces. There's no mechanism for mRNA to replicate itself in your body and be infectious. That's just silly. So yeah, I know Peter McCullough has claimed that recently, and that is super garbage. That is totally dumb. It just shows how low he's going in his grifting. Yeah, there's no way that a mRNA vaccine can shed and be infectious to others. Spartavus asks, has conspiracy theories become more prevalent on the advent of the internet, or have they always been there but more easily accessible because of social media outlets? I think so. I think they're more easily accessible now because of the internet. They've always been there. These anti-vaccine ideas have always been there. The book Pox, An American History by Michael Wilrich is a really good example of that. You can see these anti-vaccine ideas all the way back in the late 1800s, early 1900s about smallpox. The same exact sentiments. So they've always been around. Now the internet just allows anti-vaxxers to organize a lot better, and that's what they are. They're very organized and well-funded, and that's why they're so loud. Oh, I missed a super chat. Michael Burns says, thanks for taking the time to address some of the misinformation that is circulating. You're very welcome, and thank you for that super chat. You don't have to do that, but I really do appreciate it. I do this for fun. I never do it for a purpose of making money, but let's be honest, it helps. Okay. Trying to catch up to these questions. A lot of questions tonight. Anti-vaxxers, blah, blah, blah. Is there anything, Matt asks, is there anything that you think differently about regarding the vaccine efficacy and or policies since they were introduced? I think I definitely, I mean, when they were first released, I thought that 2 doses would be all we would need. And then Omicron changed that. And when they were first released, I thought, I was one of those people who did kind of think that they would stay effective at keeping cases low, keeping infections low. But now I understand that that's really not what any vaccine does. It's just for things like measles. We don't look for measles unless a child is really sick and has a rash. But a vaccine prevents the disease from getting to the point where they're really sick and have that characteristic rash. So we don't look for it. But I'm sure if we just looked for measles in the general population, we would find it. Because it circulates enough to find the unvaccinated and make them really sick. So those are some examples of things that I guess I've learned since COVID vaccines came out. But scientists have always known, the real experts have always known these things to be true. We have Novavax in the U.S., but there isn't a demand for it. Yes, that's true. There is Novavax is available. I sorry if I gave the impression that it's not approved for use earlier. There just hasn't been much news on it, and there hasn't been much data. Maybe there has. Maybe I'm just not paying attention. I haven't heard much about it, but I know that we will be getting more information about some of its approval process in the next VerbPAC meeting. I think happening later in January. Thoughts on the experimental Alzheimer's drug? I'm sorry, I don't know much about the experimental Alzheimer's drug. Yeah. I don't keep up with all medicine and all science. Susan Oliver still doing videos of Dr. Campbell. Yeah, Dr. Can of Soup. I like that. Yeah, I recommend going to her channel if you want to see coverage of John Campbell, because I'm not going to be covering him anymore unless, I don't know, unless he does something really stupid. And, well, I guess he always does something really stupid. But if I somehow change my mind that I want to cover him again, but I don't see myself doing that anytime soon. GG asks, would you like to go on debate more platforms? More people need to be informed. I mean, I enjoy debating, but it does take a lot of energy. It takes a lot of energy for me to set them up, to to prepare, and to actually do it. It's very draining. Like even my last one with Tim Truth on this channel, I thought we were just going to talk about vaccines. I honestly didn't prepare much for it. But then he brings up all this virus denier and antibodies are fake crap, and I'm just like, God, this isn't the conversation I wanted to have. But yeah, I mean, I'll try to do more debates in the future, but I tend to not prioritize them because I like doing videos better. Mama Wolf asks, you just said there is 0 chance that mRNA vaccine can cause cancer. I already addressed this. I know that what Pfizer's insert states. They did not specifically test the vaccine against carcinogenicity or genotoxicity because there was no precedent to. And so legally, they have to say that in their insert. However, within the greater scientific literature, we know very well that mRNA vaccines don't have a mechanistic link to cancer. They can't cause it. I'm still waiting for anybody who thinks otherwise to explain to me how they think cancer works and how they think an mRNA vaccine is going to cause cancer. Scott Winterwalker asks, any insights on Ed Dowd's recent book, Cause Unknown? Been seeing him making the rounds on anti-COVID vaccine media networks. Thanks. I have not heard of that. So I unfortunately can't comment. The title is concerning. But if you want to send me the gist of it or some articles about it, I could try to talk to you about it off air. Mike Frame asked, post-COVID nosebleeds, would they indicate vascular insufficiency, and how could vascular health be improved? Post-COVID nosebleeds. I mean, I don't know if they're more common after COVID. I don't know. Nosebleeds just happen sometimes. Gigi asks, if the compromised die first, that could also explain the lowering of death rate? Question mark. I'm not sure what context that's supposed to be. It's still early. John Small asks, it's still early days, but do you know of any data on how transplant/immunocompromised people are faring with COVID and the relatively decreased efficacy of vaccines for that population? Thanks. Yeah, actually, there have been some studies in the MMWR about efficacy of COVID vaccination in high-risk groups such as the immunocompromised and transplant patients, and they're very good. COVID vaccines are really good at protecting those high-risk groups from severe disease. Let me try to get further down here. Elena McCullum asks, what about reverse transcription theory? I'm assuming you mean you're asking about this in regards to the vaccine shedding thing. No, a normal, healthy person will not reverse transcribe foreign mRNA and then go on to replicate it. That's not how any of this works. Even if you manage to reverse transcribe it, there would have to be a mechanism of, there'd have to be some way of replicating or transcribing from that DNA that results from that reverse transcription. And the mRNA constructs in the mRNA vaccines don't have any such regulatory sites to do that. So no, the vaccine shedding thing is just totally dumb from every angle. John Wells asks, I seem to remember Dr. Offit not recommending the first booster due to not seeing data supporting its effectiveness. Did he later change his position when positive data confirmed effective results? Yeah. So the story with Paul Offit and his recommendations are, essentially he's following the data. He really is a stickler for that. When we were rolling out a third dose, that was before Omicron came out. And he was not convinced that we needed a third dose. He was more in the camp of, we don't need more boosters. We need more people to get their first 2 doses. And we need to get these vaccines in other areas of the world that don't have them yet. And I thought that was really reasonable. Then Omicron came along, and some really good immunologists showed that really you need that third dose to expand your immune memory in order to encompass Omicron. And then he followed that data and said, yeah, COVID vaccines are a 3-dose series. And it's a similar story now. He's not convinced that bivalent boosters are necessary. Silvio Pina, $5. Happy New Year. Looking forward to the post plugin. Thank you. Really appreciate that. Oh, we have other super chats too. Michael Holloway, keep it up. Thank you. Very, very generous. Just thank you. There are other super chats. I'll get to those. Eternity Raven, thanks for everything you do. Keep up the amazing work. You deserve many more subs. Thank you. I appreciate that. I have way more subs than I ever imagined I would have when I first started my channel. It was seriously, I thought that I would have a few hundred subscribers max, and that would be it. But here we are, and I'm really grateful. And Jake Edmondson and Mark Lamont, thank you for those super chats as well. Really appreciate both of you. Okay, let me try to get back to some questions. Trying to take them in order that they appear. So I'm sorry if your question is further down. I will get to it. Mr. Alien asks, many theorize mRNA vaccine-induced myocarditis is caused by an autoimmune mechanism. Wouldn't the J&J vax produce the same antibodies and theoretically have the same risk that isn't actually observed? ? So there probably is some myocarditis with the J&J vaccine, but I think that it hasn't been as studied. There haven't been as many doses of it given because there's a preferential recommendation against it due to its increased risk of causing a rare blood clotting disorder. So it might be that there's myocarditis with J&J, but it's too rare for us to have seen it with the number of doses given. So yeah, that's my guess with that. Shoddy M23 asks, can you explain what original antigenic sin is and if it applies to COVID vaccinations? Sure. So original antigenic sin is basically this concept where if you see an antigen, then all of your subsequent encounters of that antigen, even if that antigen has mutated far from what it once was, will be biased toward that original antigen that you saw. So I think that's I think that's clear, but it does not really apply to COVID vaccination. There might be some effect that we can observe. We might see some biasing towards some variants over others when it comes to the immune response induced by vaccination. But we also see that with infection, if not greater with infection than with vaccination. And so far, the clinical implications of both are unclear. Both immunity gained from an infection and immunity gained from vaccination appear to be pretty strong in preventing severe outcomes, regardless of this apparent slight antigenic sin observation. Mama Wolf again asks, what are your thoughts on early treatment protocols that include vitamin D, vitamin C, zinc, etc. to reduce severity of COVID? Why is CDC not pushing early treatment protocols? They are pushing early treatment protocols, just not with vitamin C, vitamin D, and zinc, because those are not going to be effective treatments. They've been studied. Treating someone who has already gotten sick with those things is not effective. What is effective are things like Paxlovid or monoclonal antibodies that work. Monoclonal antibodies currently don't really work against new strains. They have evaded the monoclonal antibody products that we have. But in lieu of that, again, we have Paxlovid, we have remdesivir. Both need to be done early in the infection in order for them to be effective. And if you get to the late stage of infection, that inflammatory phase, then steroids work. So there's plenty more. If you want more information on this, then listen to Dr. Daniel Griffin's clinical updates on TWIV. He goes over all this stuff. Mr. Alien says, I remember you mentioned that the VV vaccines, viral vector vaccines issues with clotting is due to the virus that acts as the vector. Why would mRNA in particular cause cardiac inflammation? So it's not the mRNA in particular, it's just the immune response. Myocarditis is observed with other vaccines, so it's a general immune response that contributes to it. How much the spike protein in particular might contribute to myocarditis in COVID vaccination is so far unclear. Scientists are still studying the exact mechanisms of how it's caused. But I don't think there's a question that the immune response is a big contributor. Okay. Ultimate Weapon 2000 asks, does any vitamin supplements protect against COVID? Not really, no. As long as you're not deficient in any vitamins, you're probably not going to have significant protection against disease. Nigel asks, what the definition of a vaccine really changed to help Big Pharma claim they have one. I love your content, by the way. I think you're asking if the definition of vaccine was changed, and the answer was no. No, mRNA vaccines are still a vaccine. They induce an immune response against a particular antigen to protect against disease. That's what a vaccine does, and that's what they do. Mike Frame asks, is there any relation to pollution and respiratory illness evident from the return of mass transport and manufacturing after lockdown break? I don't know if lockdown break had an effect on it, but we do know that air quality and pollution do have detrimental effects on human health that can make them more susceptible to infectious disease. We see this generally in poor communities who are living in areas with poor air quality. There's a whole field of study of environmental justice that can measure this. But I don't know if lifting lockdowns had a measurable effect on that. That would be an interesting question. Maybe scientists have already looked at it, and I just don't know. Jake Edmondson asks, can you please tell me generally what you look for in a robust paper versus a weak one? So generally, I just look at the experimental design. I ask myself when I'm reading, I'm asking, okay, what question are the authors trying to answer? And then I look at the experiments that they did, and I ask, what does each experiment ask and address? So, like one particular experiment is asking one question, and the data that it generates is going to give a particular answer. So that's generally what I'm looking for in a paper. What do the experiments ask? What are their answers? And do those answers actually give us an overall answer to the questions that the authors set out to address? Reading papers is an art and a skill. You could talk for hours about how to read papers. But that's generally like how I approach papers. M asks, I've been hearing about an infrared light therapy study for inpatient COVID infections. Have you read that paper? I have not, and I would be very skeptical of that approach. Elena McCollum asked, did you see Dr. Drew tweeted out today, another athlete suddenly collapses? Talking about the Bills player last night. Yeah, so a Bills player got tackled really hard, pretty much right in the chest, and then a few seconds later collapsed. Oops, I bumped my mic. A few seconds later he collapsed. And that's a known phenomenon. People get hit in the chest really hard, and it can mess up your heart rhythm, and you can go into cardiac arrest. What's it called? Sorry, excuse my keyboard real quick. Here we go. Here's an example of this happening. Hang on. Here's an example of this happening in a martial arts tournament. This was 11 years ago. Let's rewind that. So yeah, hit to the chest, and then he collapses. Yeah, so it's a known phenomenon. It happens in sports. It happens in sports including football. So people saying that it's this new phenomenon that can only be caused by vaccines, it's just ridiculous. And I'm very disappointed that Dr. Drew is tweeting that out. When I went on his show, I was kind of optimistic after our conversation. I thought it was a good conversation. But then, he's still just hosting anti-vaxxers, and he's actually promoting them. He's not delivering good information. It's really disappointing. Okay. Elliot asks, what do you think the cause of the higher than average non-COVID excess deaths? So it's COVID in almost every case. I'm not sure which country you're talking about. But if we go and look at excess mortality, it's almost always explainable by COVID. Because even if it's a non-COVID excess death rate, not every death is captured in those figures. So excess deaths are a really good indicator of how many deaths are actually occurring from COVID. And COVID is known to increase risk of things like cardiac events and strokes, blood clots. So, for example, we see in the US, all these excess death peaks correlate really closely with waves of COVID cases and deaths. Right now, we have kind of a constant presence of COVID in the population. Plus, we have flu and RSV coming back. And so we're seeing all these excess deaths. Meanwhile, I don't know, let's look at the UK. So, again, big spikes in excess deaths with COVID cases and deaths in 2020 and in 2021 with the first wave and then Delta. And then now that their population is sufficiently vaccinated, excess death rates are closer to normal, but there's still a lot of COVID going around. And we can go to, I guess, Australia. Australia, you see the y-axis here. It's not actually a huge increase, but when Australia dropped their lockdown measures, which, by the way, their lockdown measures did not result in excess deaths, Omicron comes in and causes a spike in excess deaths. That's about equivalent to a typical flu season, which for the Southern Hemisphere is in these months here. And then COVID is continuing to circulate and causing some deaths. So I think in most cases it's explainable by COVID. Jake says, I know it's not much, but it's all I have left of my gift cards. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate that. You don't have to give me the last of your gift card, but that's very, very nice of you. I really appreciate the generosity. Okay, fine, more questions. If you hear my dog snoring, he is snoring. Are you answering questions about a specific set of topics? If not, would you be able to share your thoughts on the idea that Paxlovid is unsafe because it's under EUA? Yeah, sure. So an EUA track for any drug or vaccine is still rigorous. It still requires a lot of safety data. It still requires a lot of testing in order to get to that EUA approval. So the idea that it's unsafe just because it's under EUA is not correct. And so I wouldn't go off that. I'd go off the actual data, which shows that Paxlovid is really effective and safe. Partly because it only attacks viral enzymes and not your own enzymes. Oh, this is an interesting question. Amp on Mex asks, if we could get you on Joe Rogan's show, would you? That's someone asked me this question the other day too, and I'd have to consider it because I feel like I would say yes, but if I actually had that offer in front of me, I feel like I'd have to do a lot of thinking because, I mean, do I want to be part of something that I am so against? Just that general platform that he has where he just, I mean, how would you describe it? He just like spews his thoughts without actually thinking or checking anything. And maybe his team fact checks him. And as a result, he spews nonsense to tens of millions of people and promotes people like Robert Malone. I mean, I think I just would because I would want to go into that space to fight it, but the honest answer is I don't know if I would actually do it. There'd also be the fallout, I don't know what I would do with that much attention if I got on Joe Rogan. That would also be something to think about. Okay, Elena McCollum asks, I think the theory about cancer is that something in the mRNA gets into the cell and can turn off the protective measures against free radicals and mutations who might not have it and cause it. No, that doesn't make any sense at all. I know that Stephanie Seneff and Peter McCullough wrote a paper together where they speculate on this. I made a video about it. It's terrible. It's terrible. The analogy I use there is like, because they're just making these connections between pathways and saying maybe this is the effect that it has without any experimental evidence to even back that up, even remotely. So the analogy I use is like, because your light and because your lights and your microwave both run on electricity, that means turning on my light switch is gonna turn on my microwave. No, it's silly. It's just silly. Like, all these cancer and mRNA vaccine claims are just ridiculous. Pesmania says Paxlovid is hard on the kidneys and liver, so it's not great for everyone. Yeah, I mean, there are contraindications for it, like any medication, but it's generally a very safe medication. And your doctor will or should know that, should know if you're at risk of those effects. And in which case you would not be given Paxlovid, you would be given something else. Although the alternative is, right now, or for a while, was molnupiravir, which is showing to not really be that great, not really be that effective. So hopefully oral remdesivir becomes more available, and that can be a alternative. Oh, okay. The Jamon 93 asks, can you describe the term leaky vaccine and whether this definition actually applies to the Pfizer, Moderna vaccines, etc.? Yeah. Anti-vaxxers love this one. They love to call these vaccines leaky. So they don't understand what leaky vaccine means. The term leaky vaccine refers to this vaccine against Marek's disease, which is a disease in chickens. It's called leaky because it prevents the chickens from getting sick, but it doesn't prevent viral replication. The chickens can tolerate the virus, and the virus can just replicate in their bodies, and they won't get sick, but it's not stopping the virus from replicating. That's why it's considered leaky. We have direct evidence with mRNA vaccines to show that they do reduce the period of infectious shedding of SARS-CoV-2 and reduce viral replication. So it's not leaky. People have this expectation that that if a vaccine does not completely block transmission, then it's leaky. And that's not correct at all. That's not what the definition means. No vaccine is going to completely prevent transmission. So what you want a vaccine to do is to reduce the amount of viral replication and reduce disease, and that's what they do. Mike Frame asks, do T cells from specific material like oleic, do T cells form from specific material like oleic acid, for example? I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think they would need a T cell epitope against something like oleic acid. I'm not aware of any T cells that have epitopes targeting molecules like that. Any study, Sue Ellen Smith asks, any studies disproving claims of severe COVID-19 vaccine injury claimed by some people, including doctors? I've had 4 Astra, Pfizer, and Moderna with no problems. I mean, vaccine injury does exist. But yeah, studies showing that they're extremely rare are abundant. There's plenty of studies showing that adverse reactions in general, notable adverse reactions, are extremely rare. But, there are going to be very rare cases of genuine vaccine injury. So, yeah. The question is always, does the benefit outweigh the risk? And the answer so far is 100% yes. Heiss says, are the antivirals for COVID new or innovations? I've had friends who said they worked very well. So the antivirals for SARS-CoV-2 actually have been in the works for a while. They were part of an effort to create antivirals against SARS-1. So they're new in the sense that they're used in humans widely now, but the concept is not new. Blocking viral enzymes with drugs to prevent them from making you sick is not a new concept. Okay. All right. Scrolling down, looking at more questions. Oh, the light study from the earlier question was on MedCram. Okay. Yeah, go to MedCram and watch that video if you want to learn about it. Because I haven't read the paper, but he's usually, from what I understand, I honestly have not watched many MedCram videos, but from what I understand, he has a good reputation. All right. Bob the Science Guy, good evening. Happy to see you here. Yeah, definitely disappointing. Dr. Drew is hosting as many anti-vaxxers as he is. He hosted, I think after I went on the show, he went on to host Ryan Cole. He hosted Steve Kirsch. Viewed them all favorably. What kind of dog? Oh, my dog is a Pit Terrier mix. If someone recovered from COVID, having been vaccinated, are they more susceptible to cardiac and stroke events? Your risk of cardiac or stroke events following COVID it goes up depending on how severe your case was. If you had a severe case, don't freak out or anything like that. This is just like, when measuring risk, we have a increase based on a confidence level. It doesn't mean that you're going to have a heart attack or stroke if you had a severe case. But vaccines are going to reduce your likelihood of having a severe case and reduce your likelihood of having those complications down the road. Carl Krambeck says about Joe Rogan, as long as you don't take anything he says seriously, it's an entertaining show. I I suppose, I've only listened to the episodes where he hosts people like Robert Malone, so maybe if I listen to an episode where he's, I don't know, hosting like Paul Rudd or something, maybe it would be a good time. But I have not. I just torture myself. If I go on Joe Rogan, he's going to make me get addicted to testosterone supplements. I hope so. That'll be sweet. I could be the new, like, the new like promoter of Joe Rogan testosterone supplements. Probably get a lot of money out of that. Logic's Conscious said, "Oh, on the TWIV urine review, your interview made it to their top 10 interviews of the year." I saw that. I was mentioned in the show notes. That was crazy to see for me. Getting on TWIV in general this year was crazy. I did not. Wow. Just wow. I've been asked by people now, like, what's next? What show are you going to go on next after TWIV? And what's your next goal for the channel? And I keep saying, like, I keep just coming back to this answer of, I think I've done with my channel what I set out to do. I'm really happy with where it is and what I've been able to do with it. So I think from now on, I'm just like, I don't have any set goals, but I'm excited to keep doing the channel. So, yeah, just really happy with it. Sam Shinnick asks, are there any concerns about vaccines/boosters and possibly worsening long COVID symptoms for people who have it? Those concerns do exist. So I don't know what came of it, but the NIH had an initiative to study this phenomenon of people getting long COVID symptoms after vaccination. So it's more rare, obviously, than with infection, but it is an observed phenomenon. I don't know how well it's been studied. But yeah, it's a concern. Worsening of long COVID, I don't know. Yeah. I'm not up on the data with that, to be honest. But I do know it is a concern. And there are people who have studied it. So. Okay. How much weed will I smoke if I'm on Joe Rogan? I don't think I could do much. No, I'll try to outsmoke him. I'll try. Why not? If I'm on Joe Rogan, why not? No, I haven't really smoked since like high school. Question about vitamin B12 for COVID-19. For example, riboflavin for COVID-19, adjuvant treatment. Oh, is this just a study? Oh, B2 for COVID-19. Okay, yeah, I guess that's just a study. I can check that out later. Is that a molecule picture over your left shoulder? Yeah, this is... So this artwork, it's by an artist named David Goodsell. He is awesome. He has a book called The Machinery of Life that he illustrates. It's on my bookshelf over there. It's awesome. I love these pictures. These pictures are so good. He does this art based on like crystal structures and cryo-EM structures of proteins and cells and membranes and stuff. And he tries to make these like realistic looking art pieces. And they're just so good. I love looking at them. If I went on Rogan, I'd have to prepare for a Gish Gallop. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Just... Joe Rogan, have I ever done MDMA? Oh man, he's just gonna ask me about my drug use history. Oh, that would be crazy. Any idea on what mRNA tech might be best applied to next? Yeah, so, I mean, I'm excited to see an RSV vaccine hopefully come out. And I know that there are some mRNA vaccines for RSV in the works. There's also mRNA vaccine technology people are trying to use against cancers, which I'm excited to see how that pans out. So those are things to watch in 2023 for sure. The RSV vaccine, I hope. I forget what stage it's in. I think last I heard Moderna had submitted their data to the FDA for approval, but I don't really remember. I'm bad at remembering news items like that. Sue Ellen Smith, thank you. Thank you for the super chat. Baron asks, is the risk of immune or cardiac issues greater if someone has had their vaccines up to the first booster following a second COVID infection? So you've had vaccines up to the first booster following a second COVID infections. So I know that with vaccines, your risk of cardiac complications with a third dose is less than with a second dose, at least in the highest risk teenage boy age group. I don't know what it would be for that particular situation that you described. But based on the data, I would guess that the more exposures and the more vaccines or infections you have, well, I don't know about infection, but I guess I don't know is a good answer to that question. I don't know if the data can really have a good answer. Can I post the TWIV interview? Sure, yeah. So go to Microbe TV. Go to TWIV. I think I am 960. Right? Yeah, that sounds right. I remember being happy that I was going to be a nice round number. Yeah, there it is. 960. There you go. Post it in the chat. Rogan worried about myocarditis, yet injects himself with testosterone. Yeah, it's wacky. Amy G asks, my fam kept mentioning some person who claimed there were huge problems with the clinical trials and no one is talking about it. Do you have any good responses for this line of talk? Logic fails. That's not a very specific claim, but the clinical trials were good. They were just what you would expect from clinical trials, what you would want from clinical trials. They have their limitations in what they can actually tell you, but that's why study is continued even after the vaccines are rolled out to the population. I have some videos talking about the clinical trials. I think my one about Asim Malhotra when he went on GB News talks about that topic a lot. So hopefully that would help. Lana McCollum, thank you for the super chat. She says, thank you for answering my questions. I am not anti-vax, just concerned for my 20-year-old son who got vaccinated. No, I understand. Yeah. All this misinformation going around, it's hard to navigate for sure. Eternity Raven asks, this is off topic, but are you into anime? If so, any personal favorites? Yeah, I like anime. I grew up watching the big ones like Dragon Ball Z and Naruto and Bleach. I did love Naruto. Looking back, it's kind of like, it gets kind of wacky toward the end. But I don't know, my favorite, I love One Punch Man right now just because I love parodies of stuff. I love when parodies are done well, and One Punch Man is just a really good parody of anime. I also like Attack on Titan. I finished the manga, actually, this past summer, and I really liked how it ended. I know that might be a controversial take, but I really liked the ending. Yeah, but I don't get to watch it much. I don't get to watch much TV at all, including anime anymore. But I like keep up by looking at summaries and stuff sometimes. Gemon 93 asks, what kind of research do you do? Are you primarily a bench scientist or prefer other kinds of work like consulting? So the work I do now, it's fun because I get to work on a variety of different projects. And I do work a lot at the bench, but I also do a fair amount of desk work like data analysis, communicating with clients and colleagues. But basically I do a lot of bench work doing, like, right now I do a lot of cell-based assays. I can't talk specifically about the projects that I work on, but yeah, I do a lot of cell-based assays. And I like having a balance between the bench and desk work. What course, Marge716 asks, what course / podcast / books would you recommend to help me understand statistics? I have undergrad biology and work as an RN. Seems like folks use p-values, but few of us really understand them. Let's see. I have a book on my shelf called Lies, Damned Lies in Science, which talks a lot about statistical analyses. Podcasts, I don't know. Courses, you can find, honestly, like Khan Academy videos are always useful if you want to try to dive into a topic. Yeah, I'd say when you're reading, a paper, the experimental design is more important than the p-value. because you can show a significant effect, but if your experimental design is crap and doesn't actually really answer the question and you just found a significant effect, then you don't really have a useful finding, or it's not as useful. Frogstar. Oh, thank you. Your show is my new favorite podcast. Discovered you on Twiv. Thank you for what you're doing. I appreciate it. I'm glad that you found me through Twiv. Rogan took ivermectin, but he also took monoclonal antibodies. Which one helped? Yeah, he took like a whole medicine cabinet of stuff. It was ridiculous. And then he's like, the ivermectin worked. Like, how do you know that? No. All right, looks like I'm caught up on questions. Oh, and thank you, Marge, for the super chat. I really appreciate that. All right. I think, so now I want to take a moment. I had another paper I wanted to talk about. So this paper was going around a lot. Let me take a drink first. All right, so this paper was going around a lot, around anti-vaccine circles a few weeks ago, and I got a lot of questions about it, so I figured I should talk about it here. It's autopsy-based histopathological characterization of myocarditis after anti-SARS-CoV-2 vaccination. So this is a German study where essentially they did autopsies of 25 people who had died unexpectedly within 20 days of a SARS-CoV-2 vaccination. And so what they found was they were able to characterize myocarditis in a fraction of these patients. I think it was 8.6% of these patients they found myocarditis. However, the authors are very clear in this paper about its limitations, how there's no control group, how their findings are qualitative or descriptive in quality, and their study doesn't allow any epidemiological conclusions in terms of incidence or risk estimation. Meanwhile, there are lots of other large studies, that some of which include autopsies, that fail to find a really significant association or even a causal link between COVID vaccination and these outcomes, specifically sudden death. They talk about their limitations here. The authors also did not completely rule out that COVID or another cause was responsible for the myocarditis that they observed. So ultimately, you can't use this paper to say that COVID vaccines are causing these deaths. It's just not there. There is no causative link. It's not powered to find a causative link. It's not powered to make a risk estimation. None of that. Meanwhile, we have other papers, like I said, that do address those questions more strongly. And we see that very consistently, not only is your risk of severe cardiac outcomes higher with COVID than without COVID or with vaccination, but COVID vaccines themselves, when they cause myocarditis, these patients usually recover very quickly and don't have any lasting negative health effects. Because again, that's what we would expect. Myocarditis is caused by other vaccines other than SARS-CoV-2 vaccines, and we don't observe long-term events from this myocarditis. And if we do, it's extremely rare, like there will be one case report in the literature. So anti-vaxxers using this paper to say that COVID vaccines are causing these deaths either have not read it, don't understand the literature, or both and more. So there you go. There's that paper. What you would want from a paper like this, what would make anti-vaxxers right, is if a paper did investigate a causative link and they found not only a epidemiological association, but a causative mechanistic link between the two. And there's just none of that exists. Yeah, I got a lot of questions about that paper, so. And it's another one of those papers where I could make a video about it, but it would be really short. Oh yeah, sure, I'll link the studies. Oh, in the description box. Yeah, I'll do that. I'll do my best to remember to do that, like tomorrow. When I kept hearing sudden death, I thought a knockoff of Mortal Kombat was released. And I didn't even think about it that way, but yeah. COVID vaccines causing fatalities. Was there different ages in the study? Most of the patients in the study, they were found dead at home. So they were almost all, if not all, old. I can double check that. Let's see. How old were these people? Where does it say it? It's probably in a table here. Oh yeah, case characteristics. So, so of the myocarditis cases in their table 2, the youngest is 46, and then there's all the ages. There's 46, 50, 62, 55, 75. And yeah, the 46 is a young age to die suddenly, but it happens. I know of someone who that happened to. They were very young, and it was before the pandemic, and they just died suddenly, and it was really sad. It was really sad. Yeah, right. Yeah, John Campbell did this paper, right? The paper itself says there's no link, and then John Campbell calls it definitive. Yeah, he's just so... he's so dishonest in the way that he presents data and cherry picks data. Yeah, there was that Cleveland Clinic study anti-vaxxers are throwing around about more doses being linked to greater risk of infection. Curious your thoughts on that. Yeah, I did actually plan to cover that too. So I have it right here. All right, so this one was also making the rounds. This Cleveland Clinic study where it was a really weird study. So essentially, when the bivalent vaccine was released, that was their study start date, and they were just measuring COVID infection by positive PCR. And their cohorts that they were comparing were numbers of doses versus, just numbers of doses. So, like, this is the graph that's going around where it shows 0 doses has the least cumulative incidences of COVID-19, and 3 doses appear to have the highest. But some things to note about this, again, you have to look at the study design. Right off the bat, this y-axis is not huge. There aren't huge differences here. And with the study design, you're looking at a patient population where you're starting on a specific date of vaccine rollout. You're not starting on a specific date of like day 0 being when you got a vaccine or when you got an infection. It's just choosing a particular start date and looking at the number of incidences. They also don't break down their population by things like healthcare workers. So are these people who got 3 doses or 2 doses, are they seeing COVID patients and more likely to test positive than people who report that they got 0 doses? There are lots of things like this throughout the study that just make it a really weird to interpret study design. But we can also look at other data sets, right? To say, okay, do more vaccine doses actually increase your risk of getting infected? So we can go back to this data set, look at cases, and we see that, well, not really. There's still a gap between unvaccinated and vaccinated when it comes to cases. So, the other thing to think about here is that this is looking at, again, cases. This is not looking at severe outcomes. So, anti-vaxxers throwing this around, saying that COVID vaccines are going to hurt your immune system or whatever they're using it to say, it ignores the fact that it's not measuring what vaccines are meant to do, which is prevent severe illness and death. And again, that's what vaccines continue to do really, really well. So this study is just, it's honestly not informative at all. It does not teach us anything, I don't think. Maybe it'll be better when it goes through peer review, but as it stands now, it's just not a useful study. But anti-vaxxers cherry pick it out and spread it like it's gospel. All right, back to the chat. Rogan is so gullible, he had a guy on saying drinking coffee with sticks of butter melted in it was good for heart health. He believed him, really, and took him on as an official sponsor of the podcast. Oh my god. Just drinking entire sticks of butter in your coffee? That sounds nasty. Ugh. What kind of music do I like? I like all kinds of music, honestly. I know might be a boring answer, but let's see. I'll just name the artists I've seen live as I think about them. I've seen Earth, Wind and Fire live. I've seen John Mayer twice. I really like John Mayer. He's an awesome guitar player. I've seen oh my god, I can't think of any now. I've seen so many though. I've seen Kendrick Lamar. I've seen Dave Matthews Band. I've seen Halsey. I've seen Lorde. I saw Billie Eilish once. That was weird. experience. My wife and I went to that concert, and it was before she got huge. It was at this small venue. We were in the back of the venue, and we look over and we see like parents looking at their phones waiting for their kids to finish with the concert. And we're like, why are we here? Are we out of place? And then like a few weeks later was when we saw Dave Matthews Band. And it was a similar situation, except we look over and we see a kid with their parents looking at their phone, waiting for their parents to be done with their concert. And we're like, where do we fit in this music crowd? I don't know. Let's see, who else? I've seen Fleet Foxes. I've seen Sylvan Esso. I've seen a lot more. I can't think of them right now. I saw so many artists when I was in grad school that it was like we ran out of people to see. I saw Bruno Mars. He was fun. I saw Norah Jones. She was great. She was really good. I really enjoyed that concert. She sounds just like her albums live. It's incredible. Was that karate clip from Surefire CPR? I don't know. I just found it on YouTube. I don't know what it was from. Hello, I'm a new patron. Thanks, Alithia, for being a patron. Have you read Robert F. Kennedy's book on Thimerosal? I had a friend recommend it to me. Can you debunk that? I haven't read his book on Thimerosal, but Thimerosal is an additive to some vaccines. Thimerosal is not in any childhood vaccinations anymore. Not because it's unsafe, but because anti-vaxxers were so worried about it that they just said, okay, forget it. We'll just take it out. Okay, you happy now? And no, the anti-vaxxers weren't happy now. But it's a mercury compound. It's not mercury. Like elemental mercury is different from a mercury compound, just like how sodium chloride, a chlorine compound, is not elemental chlorine. And it has a purpose in vaccines. Its purpose is to help preserve the vaccine, to prevent bacterial growth while it's being stored on a shelf before it's used. And it does not cause autism at all. No evidence of that. Zero. So I don't know what else Robert F. Kennedy claims about it in his book, but that's kind of the quick rundown. Earth, Wind, and Fire, so jealous. Yeah, we got so lucky. The drummer, he just died like yesterday. That was really sad. But yeah, Earth, Wind, and Fire was great. I mean, I remember we were really excited for it. And Nile Rodgers opened the show. That was so good. It was Nile Rodgers and Chic opening the show. They were so good. But we had seats for like the floor. This was in PPG Paints, which is like a really big venue. We had seats for the floor, but we were like all the way back in the floor. And we got to the venue, and they scanned our tickets, and they said, "Oh, we closed the back of the floor, so you have to go get new tickets." And I thought our seats were pretty good, so I was upset. I was like, "Oh, they better not give us worse seats." And so we go to the box office. We're like, "Yeah, we were told to come get new tickets." And the guy's like, "Oh, yeah, we had to close some seats. Are you guys big fans?" And we're like, "Yeah, we're big fans." And he's like, "Okay, here's 2 front row tickets." And I don't think it registered. We were like, "Oh, okay, thanks." And we started walking away. And then we were like, "Wait, does he mean front row? Like we're in the front row?" And yeah, we got front row tickets to see Earth, Wind, and Fire by like happenstance. It was amazing. My favorite concert that I've been to. Okay, sorry. Back to back to questions. I love Santana, old hippie here. My parents just saw Santana live. It sounded like a really cool show. I guess I'll tell him that all versions of vaccines are available without Thimerosal. Yeah. The only vaccines that contain Thimerosal are some flu vaccines. That's it. Oh, you got to see Prince? I'm so jealous. My mom's logic to Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s book being true is it couldn't possibly be untrue because he would get sued for defamation. No, I mean, he can publish whatever he wants about vaccines. He can publish whatever lies he wants about vaccines. Usually it's just more trouble to go through. It's going through the trouble of suing someone for something like that. It just isn't worth it. But, and the power to sue someone for spreading medical misinformation is very limited. Usually someone won't get into legal trouble unless they're specifically advertising products and like lying about it. So like, most products will have like little disclaimers, even though they're advertising for certain treatments. Yeah, it's really hard to actually sue people for those things. Do I know what my next video is going to be, or do I just wait and see? So I'm working on my next videos. Ron Johnson and who is it? Ron DeSantis. They both had roundtables where they had, the whole gang there to give their input on COVID vaccines and all their stupid takes. And that's going to be my next two videos, Ron DeSantis and Ron Johnson. I'm still going through the Ron Johnson roundtable. It's 3 hours long, 3 damn hours long. It's a slog to get through. So I might not have it finished by next week. If I don't have my next video finished by next week, then there just won't be a video next week, and I'll just take my time to get it done. Because I do think it's important to address those roundtables, because those are our lawmakers. So, I think it's important, but yeah, it's just going to take a while. Whenever a video is 3 hours long and I have to go through it and decide what to address and look up compile the studies to address it, and then actually film the whole thing and edit it, it's a lot. And I had less time than I would have liked to have over the holidays, so. All right, looks like I'm caught up with chat mostly. TDAP mandatory in California for all middle school age children, safe for kids with autism spectrum disorder or other intellectual disabilities, ? Yes, Rosie, it is. Andrew asked, does the vaccine change DNA? No, does not. Definitely does not. Is my channel a hobby, or do I ever think about growing it into something bigger? It's a hobby. I don't think I could. I would not want to swing it as a full-time job. It would be way too stressful to try and make that my primary income, or even like a significant income. I much prefer keeping it as a hobby and keeping my day job as like my my real job. Can you do article review videos of interesting papers? You analyze graphs very well. I could do. I mean, it depends how much time I have to, like, I could do it on live streams. That's easier than making a whole video, but I like the idea of doing like a journal club where I just review and talk about a paper. Bob Robert asks, last time you said the vax isn't gene therapy because it doesn't edit your genes. However, that is only one of the 3 definitions that can qualify medical intervention as a gene therapy. No, so a gene therapy has to change your genes. A gene-based therapy is a much broader term, but a gene therapy is something that changes your DNA to correct a genetic disorder. Do I have liability insurance? Why? Journal club streams, you could be there. Yeah, I mean, it would be really fun to do. If someone was vaccine hesitant because of myocarditis and has already had a COVID infection, which did not result in myocarditis, would vaccine myocarditis be even less likely? Probably. I don't really know. I don't think that particular scenario has been studied in enough detail. Some weird anti-vaxxer might sue me. Maybe. I don't know. I don't think they would have a case. Question. Spriggan asks, if vaccines are not effective at inhibiting transmission, how have polio, smallpox, etc. been beaten back with vaccines? So things like polio and smallpox, they have a longer incubation time. So those vaccines are going to be better at preventing transmission because your body has more time to recall an immune memory response and actually prevent viral transmission. However, polio vaccines don't actually stop polio transmission. They can reduce it, but especially in IPV, the inactivated polio vaccines that go into your muscle and not your mucosa, aren't great at preventing polio transmission. So they prevent disease, and that's why we don't see polio cases, because no one's getting paralyzed from it. But if we looked in our sewers, if we looked for the virus, we would find it. Same with measles and smallpox. Smallpox was eradicated due to a very successful ring vaccination campaign. So what would happen would be a case would pop up and anybody associated with that case would be quickly vaccinated. So there would be a quick, basically surrounding that case, there would be a lot of freshly high titers of neutralizing antibodies, which would prevent transmission. So that's how that was eradicated. Elena McCollum asked, CRISPR is gene editing, right? Yeah, CRISPR is a gene editing tool. Those viruses were DNA based and did not mutate much. Yeah, that's a factor too. Bob Roberts says after infection you don't need a vaccine. That's not true. After an infection, so let's see. I'll just show you this paper. What is it called? Oh, here it is. Yeah, so we knew pretty early on that if you are infected and you get one dose of mRNA vaccine, your immune memory gets boosted a lot. It kind of looks like 3 doses when you have one infection followed by one dose. And that extra protection is very much worth having, especially with viral variants that are mutating quickly. I've seen, Jason Parker asks, I've seen some anti-vaxxers claim that long COVID isn't real. Do you know if there is any basis in that, or is it just more BS from them? It's more BS from them. I mean, long COVID, we've seen long other respiratory viruses too, like long flu is a thing. It wasn't called long flu, but it's a phenomenon that's been observed by physicians for a long time. Respiratory viruses can wreck you. It can put you down for several weeks. Can you get shingles if you never had chickenpox but only got the chickenpox vaccine? What's the relationship with that? Let's see. Shingles is the reactivation of the virus at a later stage. I would ask your physician. I can't remember the relationship between those things right now. Long COVID is a lump all term for vaccine damage. No, as discussed earlier, COVID vaccines can sometimes produce effects that might look like long COVID in rare cases. But no, long COVID is largely an effect of the virus. Spriggan says their parents are anti-vax and sent him an awful book called Turtles All the Way Down. Oh god, that sounds terrible. I'm so sorry to hear that. Nomad79 asks, were you going to join a COVID debate on Twitter Spaces? I remember you were named as one of the speakers, but then when it happened, you weren't there. Yeah, so Mario, and I don't know how you say his last name, Nafal, asked me to be a speaker in one of his COVID debate spaces, and I accepted. I said, yes, I'll be there. It got delayed like 4 times. It got like postponed to different days. And then when it finally happened, I couldn't join the space. And I was only available for like 1 hour to be part of the space. I like screenshot it on Twitter and put it in the comments. I couldn't join the space. It was really strange. I would try to click on his profile and it wouldn't show me that he's in a space, and I'd see his tweet with the space and it would just say space unavailable. I don't know what the problem was. But Twitter Spaces are just, I've listened to like one of them that was COVID related, and it was just a dumpster fire. It was awful. So maybe it's a blessing in disguise that I didn't have to subject myself to that. Carl asks, what would happen if COVID started attacking memory B cells? That would not be good. Memory B cells are pretty important. If COVID specifically attacked those, that would be bad. If CL asks, if my third booster was 2 years ago, and to my knowledge I have never had COVID, how much protection do I currently have? You still have immune memory, and that's what you want. My guess is you've probably been exposed to COVID. You might not have known it, but you also could have avoided it. But immune memory against COVID lasts as long as we've looked. And based on the fact that people who were infected with SARS-1 still have memory against SARS-1, you can bet that memory against SARS-2 is going to last a long time. the anti-vaxxers hackers got me. I seriously don't know what happened with that, because like other people were able to join it. I don't know what happened. Bob Roberts asks, why would a vaccine tailored towards one part of the virus be better than immunity generated against the whole virus? Because a vaccine is safer and still gives you really robust immunity against the protein that it needs in order to actually fuse with cells and replicate. So if you stop that, then you stop the whole virus. You don't need immune memory against all of its parts. Measles attacks immune memory. Yeah, that's why measles was really bad. It actually can cause what's called immune amnesia. I did a video about that a long time ago, like in the first few months of me doing my channel, because Del Bigtree says that immune amnesia caused by measles doesn't exist, but he's Del Bigtree, so what do you expect? Question, I have a QAnon family who caused chaos to my family since the pandemic in 2020. Any advice on how to deal with that? That's tough. I think with family it's always tough. I think my advice that I would try to give is try to have really good conversations with them as best you can. Really listen to them, let them air their thoughts, and ask questions on why they might believe what they believe. Just give them the space to explore their own thoughts, and maybe you can challenge them if you feel it's appropriate. But if it's too taxing for you, like if it's stressful talking about that stuff with your family or frustrating, don't do it at your own expense. It's not worth it. Put yourself first. But yeah, it's tough. It's really tough when family fall into that. Okay, only a few more questions and then I need to... Oh my god, it's almost 10:30. Okay, yeah. A few more questions, then I need to go to bed. Because my daughter gets up early. Okay, Jason Parker asks, so the mRNA instructs our cells to produce the pyramid spikes, right? Yeah, it's just a spike protein. So I assume it also instructs our cells to cease production after a certain point. So the cells can only produce the protein as long as the mRNA is there. And the mRNA is not going to last forever. It's going to degrade. There are several mechanisms within cells to degrade RNA. Your own mRNA gets degraded over a certain amount of time. You can think of it as each mRNA molecule having a half-life. So yeah, it's going to stop after a certain point, and that point is going to come pretty quickly. And no, it's not a dumb question. CL asks, can you explain why we need a yearly flu vaccine but won't need regular COVID boosters? So every year, the mechanism by which new flu strains emerge is different from the mechanism of how we get new SARS-CoV-2 variants. Flu's genome is organized into these segments that can recombine with each other or swap. It's called antigenic shift. And so that creates entirely new flu strains every year. Whereas SARS-CoV-2 has to accumulate mutations over time. It can recombine with other coronaviruses, but the mechanisms are not the same. So I don't anticipate us needing new COVID boosters every year. I think our immune memory is going to be able to recall well enough from year to year whatever variants we encounter. Are the per capita incidences of significant side effects of mRNA vax any greater than other vaccines currently in use for other diseases? I believe it was compared to the flu vaccine and found to be comparable in terms of significant adverse events. I believe there was a study a while back looking at that. Jeff Straka asked, are there any concern over mutations from China since they really messed things up there with lockdowns, poor quality vaccine, and low vaccination rate? I mean, yeah, more infections means more mutation and possibly a much more different SARS-CoV-2 variant. But this virus is really hard to predict. So, concern, yes. Will it happen? We'll just have to see. Okay, these last few questions. No more questions. Sorry, no more. It's getting too late. I had too much fun. But Jeremy Moss says, I read somewhere that the more religious lean... I don't know. Jason Parker, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Bob Roberts, how does pseudouridine replacing the uridine affect the mRNA half-life? It protects it from toll-like receptors. So those are innate immune functions that would destroy the mRNA before it could even get read by the ribosome. That's what the pseudouridine replacements are going to do for the mRNA. It's not going to make it have a ridiculously long half-life relative to your other mRNAs, because your other mRNAs also will have a fraction of their uridine replaced by pseudouridine. So it's not going to make it stay around for super long amounts of time. So it's not something to worry about. What do I think about mutation in the Northeast United States? I mean, yeah, I'm not sure what you're asking there. It's mutating wherever it's spreading, so we'll just have to see what effects those mutations have in the future. Okay, yeah, that's it for tonight. I need to go to bed. My daughter's going to be up at like 6 a.m. or 5:30 if I'm unlucky. So thank you all for coming tonight. This was fun. I'm going to clip some portions of this to upload over the next week to kind of... what's the word I'm looking for? I'm too tired now. To hold you over. To hold you over until I can finish those roundtable videos. So, yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this. Thank you again for all the super chats. Really appreciate that. But have a good week, everybody. And hopefully I'll be able to have my next video done soon. So, take care, stay safe, stay healthy, and Happy New Year. Bye-bye.